We do have a number of delegations this evening, but before we get to those, we should adopt the agenda with a late item memo, as well as, I believe there was another piece of correspondence related to an event they're wishing to run in Northeast Woods.
That's the, oh, yes.
Did you print that? I don't know if you printed that one.
So that one should be.
Maybe it's already on our list here. I'm just double checking. Yeah, I didn't refresh, so.
I'll move it anyway.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Those in favor? Motion's carried. All right, our first delegation this evening then is from the Avian Rescue Society. We have Pearl McKenzie and Madge Birch. So welcome and come to the podium.
Thank you. Would you like me to turn on this mic, or can everyone hear me
It
if I
should
speak
be
up?
live, ready to go.
Yeah.
It's ready to go?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Mayor Ives, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name, as you said, is Pearl McKenzie. I'm the Vice President of the Volunteer Board of Mountainair Avian Rescue Society. And with me is Mary Jane, or Madge Birch, who's the founder of Mars. So this is a pretty brief PowerPoint presentation. Just want to tell you, maybe we could...
Is it up and running? Where'd you
It
go?
will just be up in a second.
Okay. So Mars has been operating a wildlife rehabilitation center out of its Merville facility for the past 20 years. We serve the North Island from Fanny Bay to Port Hardy. There we are. And the adjacent mainland coast. So in essence, we serve one half of Vancouver Island, the northern half. We rescue, care, and next slide please. We rescue, care for, and rehabilitate raptors. This includes eagles. We actually rehabilitate more eagles than any other wildlife facility on Vancouver Island. We also care for hawks, ospreys, swans, as well as songbirds, waterfowl, mammals like bats, raccoons, mink. And as this slide represents, a lot of our patients during the spring and summer months are young and vulnerable. For example, baby birds, fawns, baby squirrels, baby seals. Last year we treated almost 40 species that are considered at risk and endangered species, including great blue herons, ancient and marbled murrelets, barn, northern pygmy, saw-whet, and screech owls, brown bats, sandhill cranes, as well as numerous other birds and mammals. The vast majority of these animals need our care because they've been negatively impacted by human activity. So in other words, we're causing a lot of the trouble and that these animals are having. So next slide, please. During the past few years, our caseload has almost doubled, and we've run out of room at our existing facility. So just to give you a quick idea of what we're dealing with, our wildlife hospital right now is a converted garage. It shares space with the lunchroom and the admin office. And as you can understand, we can't exactly put wildlife on top of each other. So we really do need to expand, and there's no room at our present location. Next slide, please. We reach thousands of people with our educational program. An example of an initiative underway right now is a partnership with the town of Comox to install a sign at the Point Holmes boat ramp to educate people about the need to protect wildlife in public places, how to live with them and share the beach. We have brochures from this project to distribute and items to give to children in the schools to reinforce the message. This project is funded by the TD Friends of the Environment. Next slide, please. Mars makes presentations with our educational birds, and you can see Reg with Brinley, at public events in local schools, senior centers, and service clubs. Because of space limitations at our current location, almost all of our education consists now of outreach activities. And just in case you can't read this little letter from Mackay, he says, "Thank you for what you do. Here is half of my birthday money. Please keep saving animals as long as they're still here and even further." 2 years ago, next slide please. 2 years ago, a supporter, Michelle Woodrow, whom I think some of you may know, made Mars the beneficiary of a certain portion of her estate, enabling us to purchase 4.4 hectares or almost 11 acres of land on the Old Island Highway in Merville between Courtenay and Campbell River. Next slide, please. We're here today to tell you about our plans to build a new facility and to ask for your support. We know that local governments do not have a lot of money, but we also know that you're working on your budget soon for the coming year, and we're hoping that you'll put some money aside for Mars and the wildlife that needs your help and our help. Next slide, please. Here's an example of the cost involved in our first development phase. The first phase is to build a caretaker's residence and a hospital, and we have a builder who's prepared to do that for us for $100 per square foot, and other local companies offering materials and services. Just a little note about this caretaker's residence. Our permits require that we have someone living on site, and that's why we need the caretaker's residence. Could I have the next slide, please? So building the wildlife hospital is our first task, and once that's complete, we have plans to build a wildlife eco-center, a place where local residents and visitors to the North Island can come to learn about wildlife and connect with the natural world. Mars has submitted recently an application to Island Coastal Economic Trust, or ICE-T, for $325,000 to help us build this center. And we're hoping that you will support this application. Next slide, please. So why do we need a wildlife eco-center? It's because, as I mentioned earlier, we need room to offer on-site educational programs for children and their families and people visiting our area, and enrich our academic partnerships with other researchers and rehabbers. The idea is that visitors to the Wildlife Eco-Center will be able to observe rescued wildlife through closed-circuit cameras. And at the present time, because we don't want to cause stress to our patients, we keep them separate from the public. Students and volunteers will provide information about our patients, explain the cause of injury or illness, and the course of treatment. Next slide, please. Mars, as I mentioned, rescues and treats up to 50 bald eagles each year, more than any other wildlife center located on Vancouver Island, and we badly need a new flight pen for eagles and other large birds to recover. I'm thinking of birds like snowy owls, sandhill cranes, great blue herons, great horned owls, and even pelicans. So we'll build small viewing windows into the flight pen for visitors to watch the birds in flight without disturbing them, and we will also install cameras so people can view these magnificent birds on a large screen monitor in the visitor center. Next slide, please. We also want to build aviaries for our educational or ambassador birds. These special birds are several different species, and they all cannot be released for different reasons. They're not kept as pets, but as educators, and they work with their handlers to inform the public about the dangers that wildlife face, and to give people a glimpse of the beautiful animals that many people have never seen up close and in person. Next slide, please. So, one of the other things that we'd like to do on this property is to build housing for the students and visitors who come from all over the world to help Mars. And these students and guests will work with Mars staff and volunteers to provide information about wildlife and care and lead visitors and nature walks around the wetland. Many of the students are post-secondary, they're looking to have some work experience before they decide on a career in biology, environmental studies, or veterinary medicine. And they work 6 days a week for us, long hours, especially during baby season. We can't afford to pay them. We'd like at least to give them some decent housing. So next slide, please. We have a pond that we're building on the property with, it's a wetland restoration project funded in part by the Habitat Conservation Fund. And we plan to build a boardwalk and viewing area for the public to learn about the value of wetlands and how to conserve water. And the final slide, in summary, our timeline. Right now we're developing designs for the Wildlife Hospital. We're getting quotes for bringing in power and septic systems, and we hope construction will begin next spring on the Wildlife Hospital. If all goes well and the ICE-T funding comes through, we will begin building the Wildlife Eco Center about this time next year, or maybe a little bit earlier. An opening date for the new facility is May 2017. So we hope very much to see you there. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your presentation. Any questions at this time from members of council? Go ahead, Councilor Price.
Yes, I'd just like to say it's amazing what you've all done from starting from scratch to a project in the works of this dimension.
This is Nage. This is the legacy she's leaving us, yes.
And certainly, not only for wildlife, but as a tourist attraction, there's a lot of customers for the Comox Valley. And just on our process to consider the request, would we do that at another meeting, just so we can let the delegation?
Yes, normally we would consider it at the next council meeting, I believe. In terms of the two requests, one is a letter of support for funding, application, to the Island Coastal Economic Trust, and the other is funding from the town. That being said, the funding from the town will be difficult because we have a policy against grants and aid. So, and it's also a project obviously outside the town boundaries. So, but as far as a letter of support for ICE-T, then we could consider that at the subsequent meeting. Just the one question, I sit on that board, as most mayors do. I assume for that aspect of the project, you're going to be showing or have already demonstrated in the application an economic benefit?
Yes.
Okay, because that is the key, obviously, with the Island Coastal Economic Trust.
And Mayor, we've been working with the Comox Valley Economic Development Society to provide statistics to show that benefit.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so nothing further, then we'll let you go at that, and subsequent meeting to deal with your request. All right, the next delegation is Stephen Kohlmeyer, Kohlmeyer Architecture, regarding the Marina Park revitalization project, and to provide us with an update on the public open house that was held in September. Yeah, we're ready to get set up here. Here we go.
So I'm here with Al Brothers of Algae Corporation, who he and I are working together on this throughout the whole period of the project, and he'll be part of the presentation. Now you might want to come up now to be part of this, I think. I should tell you, we can talk about this for a long time because there's so many little details.
You got 10 minutes.
So we're not.
We've got a lot of delegations after you.
Yes, understood. So the main goal tonight is we've been working a lot since the last open house to bring all of our budget projections and available monies to get to be at least close to being in sync, and want to explain that to you and where that is going. But as a start, I would like to at least take a small amount of time to get everybody up to date in case some of you don't know what's going on with the planning. So we'll do that as quickly as I can, and then talk about what's happening with the budgeting. And I didn't bring my laser pointer, but I think we can manage. We're working, I think all of you know, on the waterfront and strengthening the linkage between the downtown and the waterfront, and making the waterfront a stronger destination and an area for more activity and for social benefit, and with economic spin-off benefit for the development. And the bulk of our work will be going on along the waterfront, and which you can see in the sketch here. The little village is our language for it. And new sidewalks going all the way up to Port Augusta and the Comox Avenue, and rest areas along the way, because it's a bit of a tortuous route right now, especially on the east side. Actually, both sides are a bit tortuous, so we make them much more easy to negotiate and more pleasant and more inviting. So that's the broad version. We've been at this since late 2013, and did a lot of work with pretty broad-based stakeholder groups and council in late 2013 and early 2014, developing planning approaches and design at the level we could carry forward. Applications to IST, our own applications to IST, which took a while to get through, but did go through. And then applications with Western Economic Development, which finally confirmed early last summer. And since then we've been up and running, trying to make all this happen, reopening a much more in-depth process of stakeholder review, functional planning, technical review of things like soil. Tomorrow you'll see holes being dug down here as we look and see what soil really looks like, to see what foundations have to be for buildings. And this last round, the last culmination of it was an open house here about 3 weeks ago, which was well attended, extremely positive response. We were happy to report. So both of the big open houses have been quite positively responded to. And we are taking the feedback, positive and not always so positive, and trying to build that into design development and decisions on the project. And Al has been doing fairly careful amalgamation of the results of the open house, and would like to speak a little bit about that.
Thanks, Steve. Just to be very brief on it, you have the report, and I believe you have the actual individual response sheets from the September 9th open house that you can look at. And the comments are fairly detailed, which reflects, I think, a very interested group of people that came to see. A year ago, we did the first open house, and we had it fairly well structured in terms of the opinionaires that we put out. We got a pretty good response. Issues that came up have been already addressed at the last public meeting in terms of the concerns people had with accessibility by boaters to their boats, some parking issues, sightlines and so forth, and I won't go over that. That's already been addressed. It was in the documentation. We posted the same information on the website, on the town's website, so what was presented in terms of written materials at the September 9th session were also on the website for those who were interested. I think the media was asking for that, and so that we were able to do that, again, to keep it very transparent. And this is about transparency. We got fewer people. You know, the process was very simple, and many of you attended it. You signed in if you wished. There was some boards and models and the video running of kind of a three-dimensional view of the sort of the village component that Steve will get into in a sec. So that was pretty, and there was lots of discussion, and people had sheets to fill in. We used the the town's commentary sheet, which was basically you can put down anything you want, and people did. And I was quite pleasantly surprised that although there were fewer people at the September 9th meeting, we estimate about 100, so there was about 20 people, fewer people that showed up. And we had fewer written comments. We had 50 comments, and only 5 of those comments I would describe as down and out negative. And it's important to look at what the negatives are as well as the positives. There are a lot of additional suggestions. They're in. You can look at each individual comment sheet. It's in your tablet. Still concerns from the boating community. Make it much more about boating. Give us more facilities, better access, more parking. Hello? More? Can we? And also, of course, there's the concerns about people who say it's just a waste of taxpayers' money. It's not going to do anything. Let's fix the rest of the town before we do the waterfront. Another level of comment. Or one person said, "Where's the excitement? There's nothing here. There's no place to drink. There's no place to eat." And of course, that's what we're headed towards by the logic of this. It's a two-stepper. First, you put in attractions to people there, and then from there on, then I hope you attract business activities, increase food services, and so forth. So 68%, or 20 out of 30 forms or comment sheets were very, very positive. Lots of suggestions. I've summarized a lot of suggestions that came forward. How about more showers in the Marine Services building? And we want to get into it, but there are showers available already for those who need to have showers. But we're building facilities for the general public, not just for the municipal marine. It's for everybody, and there are no showers. But there are showers available at the federal site over there, and in the commercial marina for those who need showers. We're concerned that to build showers for people who just come down for a day's boat ride is perhaps a little over the top. I think that was the concern. Okay, so you have all that information. Basically, you're getting a pretty strong vote of confidence. Lots of nice little additional suggestions that came in. There was a lot of thoughtfulness in the comment sheets, so the community, I think, is pretty much on side with what you're doing. And of course, we're making it transparent all the way.
Great, thank you.
So I should point here that I have a pointer which isn't working. So this is the east and west boundary of the main park. This is the area that we will be doing our development in phase 1. The development to the east and the west, the Compass development over here, and possible multi-use facility along the east side of the harbor area will be a future development. Just to let you know, this is where we've done our fancy drawing finishing up, but it goes all the way up to Port Augusta and Beaufort. And there will be a new rest area at that corner, and then another rest area at the top of the ramp here, where a very steep stair is. The stair will be rebuilt as a much more generous stair, and a very soft, easy ramp to come down to here, right? Rather than those who tried the maze of coming down the street and crossing back. It will be much more easy and comfortable arrival point. The pieces of the development down here will be the Marine Services building, which will have 2 commercial services for waterfront, the Wharfinger public washroom, much more generous and nice than we have now. Some storage for the sailing school. These 2 buildings are about 1/3 building and 2/3 roof. I think a lot of you have heard the theory about this. We'll be having 2 spaces big enough for 90 to 100 people gatherings of non-profit groups, of profit groups, of tourist groups, community groups. So there really will be a gathering function. And the roofs are available for kind of making it easier for local short-term commerce to be there, hopefully growing into longer-term convenience to the space. We're bringing the playground from up in where it is now down to this area, and if it works out, a water play area. There are lots of issues related to that happening. The stage, which had been here for years, will now be here, which will be much better for two things. Audience comfort, because the sun's in the right direction, but also the sound will be going away from the residents rather than right at them during their program. So that's the kind of nutshell version of what we're doing. We have another drawing here, which is more for folks looking at up close, but showing, sorry, not great to show it with here we are up to Beaufort, but the walkway here, we'll be doing walkway improvements all the way down.
Can you put it on the stand so we can try to see it?
Sure. I'm trying to avoid the light.
Better light work.
So we'll be making this more pleasant, much more pleasant little rest area, and stairs down here, and a ramp which extends all the way down to the new plaza. And starting with wider sidewalk here, a sidewalk we don't have even now. Starting up here and coming down in a soft slope, more like a winding path, strip by steep right through here, entering into the park and coming down. So the entrance and arrival from the downtown will be much more comfortable and inviting than it is now. That's the bulk, that's the outline of the work. I'll walk you through now. The first slide is the basic funding framework that's in position now. I'm using round numbers because I think it's easier for us to discuss them as we kind of carry back and forth the numbers. So the reason that the detailed numbers around it is, I think, makes it easier for the discussion and decision making. The ICE-T WED Town of Comox monies, which are approved, are about 1.3 million. The Community Works Fund for sidewalks and pathways is 0.2, for a total of 1.5 as a base amount of money that we have in hand at the moment to work with. What we get for that is an awful lot of what we're hoping to get, so it has to be understood. But the budget for the whole project has always been bigger than we've been working up toward, trying to get as much as we can to make as much happen as we can to have a complete and effective project. The two buildings get paid for with a little bit of landscape improvement for 1.3. Paths and rest areas, that's the 2 million that we, or the 200,000 that we've already mentioned. And that's what we get for paths and rest areas and buildings. But it's worth remembering what that means is that we have buildings and paths and a little bit of path work down on the waterfront, and the rest of it is unimproved landscape. Often it's post-construction landscape in some areas. So we don't get, the 1.5 doesn't get us to having a place. We have some key elements there, but it's not done yet. So what we are strongly recommending is, and requesting because it's your decision as council, that the $400,000 that you committed as actually going beyond the matching funds for the Canada 150 fund in June, if that money is still available and you're prepared to commit it, it makes a huge difference in the level of work we can complete. And we talked to Dr. Quest about this, and you can address that as well, but there seems to be a level of comfort at the administrative level about that happening. So for 1.9 million, which is really our big suggestion to you tonight, this is broken down slightly differently. We have 1.3 from the buildings. We would get lighting, furniture, site furniture, which is benches and lighting and garbage cans, bicycle racks. We get signs and landscaping for about $100,000, and all the paving, which is a substantial amount of paving for all the plazas and generous walkways we're doing, for about $500,000. That includes, of course, the walkways up to Comox that we've already talking about. So we can get for 1.9 million a project which starts to be complete. There's always more we can do, but in fact we have a nest of activity and completion of spaces which will be very nice. We have the buildings, the 3 buildings that we've already gone for, the marine services, the 2 multi-purpose buildings. We have a lot of things. These are spotted dots, which are kind of all over the place. But for lighting, public area lighting, benches, bike racks, waste receptacles, trees, soft landscaping, and signage. All the paving and paths then gets done within this whole zone, so all the way up to Beaufort, all the way up to Beaufort, coming down plaza areas, which will be pleasant spaces, and the new, sorry, I didn't mention, there's now a new gangplank here, which will facilitate movement of services and taking goods up and down from actually assigned parking space here down to the docks. But so there's some things that aren't there. So I think the big hope is that you are okay and agree that the 400,000 from June can survive, because that gets us to a point where we actually move ahead with the project. We have some pieces which aren't there. One is on stage, the electrical service to the stage. I should explain right now, and for a number of years, there's a big panel in the existing building, shed building down here, and they string out a cable out to the stage here on the west side of the park, and that's how they get the power for the sound and light for the stage. That can carry on forever and ever, but it's nicer to have varied services and nice, good quality electrical panel that you can screw in and quickly move ahead with. So we're hoping we can do that. It's about a $55,000 job, but we've been adding our contingency allowance and the fee allowance for all of these items. So you're seeing the gross amount of money for all these costs. So it would be nice to get that, but we can survive without it for a while if we have to. The playground we mentioned is moving. The playground is nearing the end of its life. So in this budget cycle, some close by budget cycle, this may be something that's due for replacement. So we may look at it that way, but we think that the playground, the kids, and everything else being down near the center is a very important to contributing and an integral part of the liveliness and kind of community contact that's happening down there. So that's $100,000. And the water park and spray fountain, I haven't mentioned yet tonight, but the water park is a bit of a separate initiative that we're working within to see if we can work together with the town, with the DIA, with Rotary, and with the Boys and Girls Club, all who are tentatively projecting. The town has put their money on the table and waiting for the other groups to do the same. If we get it all, it will be $300,000 between them. We've gotten some pricing on the park of the scale that's in Courtney, which people have been comparing as the scale we're looking at, which are a bit lower than the projections we've heard. So we were told just actually 2 days ago by a Vancouver company that does these on the island across the country, that for about $150,000 you should be able to get what Courtney has. So that is good news. The spray fountain is something which has become quite popular in public spaces. There are actually little discs in the ground that shoot water up, and they turn off and on, and they're quite lively. So when they're just running, they're like a fountain, but there's no basin, there's no problem drowning children or poisonous things in the water. And they can have quite wonderful things with the lights go up and down, and the water goes up and down, and kids love them, and the old people, all the old folks get to be kids too around them. But they're also like a nice calm fountain in the plaza. So we think it's very important to get it if we can. So these are just pictures of the pieces that we're talking about. This is, going back down, this is the area where we're talking about probably as few as 7 of these little spray elements, which are normally doing nothing. But people come, you push a button, you start squirting, they can change and become quite active. They're great for running around, the grandparents and grandchildren. And they're also nice, as I say, as a fountain for this more restful part of the park. We are hoping, if it all works out, that when the playground comes here, indicated in red, and the water play space comes down here, that this becomes a very active playground, very attractive. And one of the things that the BIA people have talked to us about is the advantage of having these together, is that when a parent is there, the kids are bouncing back and forth between the two, rather than separating them. So I think it's very appealing. And again, these have the advantage, they're not swimming pools, they're not wading pools, they're actually the water skirts up, you play with it, and then it's gone. So there are management, real serious management advantages to them. These can basically, you get the amount of equipment and the power on the pumps, depending on how many pieces you get. So the prices are sliding scale prices. We can pick the kind of the scale that suits for budget and for scale of the place. And sorry, this is just a line reminding us, this is the other piece, is getting wire from there to there to plug into the stage. So I've taken the same list and just highlighted it. For us, I think at the 1.9 we get a pretty nice project. I think it will change the definition of the waterfront, and we hope to begin to change the definition of Comox. If we could get the stage servicing, it will just be a handy thing to have, and it makes that whole process much more easy and manageable. And it also means that attracting more of these events, that's been a lot of the discussion the last couple of years, will be a lot easier, because the stage people come, they screw in a little plug and they're up and running. The other red one, of course, is a pet project of mine. If we can manage with our working with numbers and pieces of the puzzle to get another $50,000 out of the picture, I think it will be a major impact on the literally attractiveness, as in attracting people, as an element down there that people come to and want to be around. Water is a wonderful magnet. As I mentioned before, the new playground is on the horizon as part of the cycle of infrastructure management for the town. It's probably a 5-year issue because you're a 5-year budgeting cycle, so it would be nice if we didn't have to wait that long. But if we did have to wait that long, it's not the end of the world. So it's something that I think it's a way to look at it and not force that budget weight on the process now. And the water park, of course, is its own trajectory, its own life. The town has committed serious funds for it. You may not need all the double of that to do it, which affects that in terms of your own decisions on budgeting and funding. And for us, it's really cool and a wonderful thing. There have been discussions about it being here and in other parts of the town as well. We think here will be a successful thing, but we don't think it's the key thing to make the project happen. So if it does happen, we think it's a great complementary development on the site, and we're very much in favor of it, but we don't see it as kind of the thing to hang our hat on. If we can get it, and we get it in conjunction with the playground, it could be a very successful enrichment in the thing, and create quite a buzz. These things are pretty fun, kids enjoy them, and the parents enjoy them as well. So just one last reminder on the amounts we have that we're talking about. We have the 1.3 and the 0.2, which we already know about, the 400,000, which we were hoping you as council are prepared to recommit. And then the two pieces, one which will be other people collecting money, and the money for the town of Comox. Part of that other 150 we've already participating, so there are other donors, but the town is the main player of this, of course. So the total amount of money we're talking about on the project, if the water park's included, and this is money gets, as we decide how this money is spent, is $2.2 million. The other issue, which I was going to mention earlier, but didn't think is important, is scheduling. We are we're a bit later than we were hoping to be, because it took a while to get announcements formalized in the summer. We are ready to start doing working drawings today. In fact, we have to be starting today. We want to get all of our technical documents, contract documents, working drawings and prints, done by the middle of January. And that's actually a pretty tight squeeze for us to get it done. Tender in mid-January, close in early February, and award, we hope by mid-February or at the latest, the last 2/3 of February. With award, we can start doing the work. The bulk of money, cash flowing from the governments, federal government in particular, will be April 1st. It's the beginning of the new fiscal year, and that's how we've scheduled that cash flow. But there is other cash that can flow before that, and there's no penalty for you paying money, bridging the money if we have to. But I don't think it'll amount to very much. That's probably not a big issue, just knowing you can do that. And the reason we've got to push to this schedule is commitments that come with the funding for WED and ICT. These things actually have to move ahead at this schedule. So we're kind of at the point where we can either go with 1.5 or 1.9 or 1.9 plus a bit more. And we'll start our work over the next week or two on the 1.5 assumption, because we know they tell us we don't, but the 1.5 is there. But hopefully we can receive confirmation that the 1.9 is what we're working with, because otherwise we're actually building buildings in a big one file. So I hope that's clear.
It is.
Okay.
We will be discussing this at committee of the whole next week in terms of further details, so unless there's specific questions that we won't be discussing next week, then we can let you go, but there may be something that the council would like to ask at this juncture.
Thanks, Steve, for your presentation. Really pleased to see the access and walkways as part of this project in its initial stage. Could you tell me a little bit more about the stage? I was at the stakeholder meetings, and I know it was one of the ideas that came up, but I haven't heard anything more about it since then. So
there's probably not much to tell you. Right now, the idea is that the portable stage, it'll be a portable stage function for the foreseeable future. We're all very interested in the idea of a more permanent pop-up kind of stage, which some of the communities on the Sunshine Coast have been doing. So they can be very appealing. So they're low, but one of the concerns we have is that it's a structure is right in people's view from their homes immediately up the hill. But we think we had a good quality tent type. It's basically a band shell, wind protection, sun protection, or water protection shell, usually using electronic projection for the sound, of course, and lights. So we've talked a little bit about if that would be available, if the funds would be available, this could perhaps be a pretty good attractor for the community. Because the one seashell, I think, it's one that folds down, but the platform becomes a kind of wonderful play place for kids and for those small events, the kind of almost casual events. And the roof comes up and they can fairly quickly shift into something that works better for kind of more frequent mid-scale events. So that's what we know so far.
and so what would be the approximate size?
Oh boy. That's really off the top of my head now, but I think probably 45, 55 feet, about 15 meters maybe diameter. I think that's the scale. I'm trying to remember some theater work we were doing that we're doing at the scale. I think that would be about the size.
But this time we're not talking about building a stage. We would just simply, the stage that we set up for nautical days, they would move it over there and the electrical would be there instead.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And in terms of your meetings, I'll be available at home if it's helpful for
Yeah, well, let staff set that up with you, Councillor Arnott.
Yeah, thanks for that. It looks good. A couple comments I'd like to make is, we're doing this because we want to revitalize our downtown. We want to draw people in. But the comments the other fellow made, kind of flippant and dismissive of washrooms, is that the other thing that I believe the town should be interested anyways, is bringing transient boaters into Comox. We talked about our new software for our recreational department and how it would have modules in there that perhaps people could look at what slips would be vacant, and we draw people in. So while we're drawing business from the downtown, there's a whole bunch of people out there that want to come into Comox. And I think the shower thing is something that we really need to review. You had mentioned that there's the federal dock, and you said the commercial marina, but I'm guessing you're thinking the other private marina. But you can't get in there. They're locked. That one, there's a gate there, and then there's a lock to get into that washroom. The federal dock, they don't just give that away, that code. So no, there is no shower facility for boaters.
Is there a question for the
No, but this is my opportunity to bring
Well,
up
we'll
my
be discussing it next week too.
I just want to make sure that that's something that I've heard from a lot of voters, that we look into that. The second point is the water park. If we were to do something like that, Tell me about the water. How, is it just shooting up and then it's going into a drain out to the ocean? Are we recycling the water?
Yeah, that's, we've been learning a lot about it ourselves. The first thought, of course, is recycle. Of course, we had, what a drought was here last year, and when you have recycling water, you have about double or triple the cost of the project. Plus, you have to have maintenance literally every day on the system. It's like swimming pool control of water. So they become prohibitive pretty quickly. So the general advice is use flow-through water. One thing we're investigating is salt water, so we don't have an answer on that yet. If there's concern, it's probably more to do with salts actually building up in the equipment. I think corrosion wouldn't be an issue. The kind of the big defense of it is in the freshwater. First, the heat's much cheaper. As you know, you never have any problem with, well, we hope. Basically, it's drinking water that we're playing the hose. Is that the water is off basically almost all the time. So there's not flowing water, and so they can be motion sensors. You could be a schedule. There's an even mountain going. You push the button, and it's going to be turned off again. Typically, they're on for quite short spells. We've been learning this as well. But on the ones we were playing, the kids have about a minute and a half kind of focus on these things, and they move on to other things. So the water, they come to it, either motion sensors or buttons. They become quite active, and then they die down, so that the water then follows the kids, and then it's off the rest of the time. So there's a lot of attempts in the business to try and keep that flow, the gross flow per season, down quite a bit.
Do we know how much?
I can get into it, but I don't have that.
I know the city of Courtenay looked at this past summer, and it was relatively minor amount of water that was being consumed in relation to everything else, but it's something that we're looking at, and of course, this will be an option that will be considered, not even necessarily for the project for next year. It's going to require.
Well, that's one thing.
Partnership.
This part can be any time. We talked today about possibly doing just the plumbing for it, and it's going to be its own future.
So council will be looking at the budgetary impact next week. So if there's nothing else, then we can move on.
Can I just speak to what was not quite a question on the shower, knowing it is an issue? There was a lot of talk about it early on with stakeholders, so that can come up internally as you discuss it. One of the issues I did hear about is that the voters are leasing out their slips, and those become where the transit voters are. And they're using that to reduce their costs, their personal costs for the year, but I don't think the money's coming back to the town.
Yeah, how does it come back to the town?
Yeah,
if I lease my slip out in the summer and it's cost, and Buddy has to pay me $200, the town gets 50% of that.
Sorry.
So it is a win-win for the town.
Yeah, okay, so that was only...
Plus my full mortgage that I've paid all the year.
Yes, and there's other spin-off. We all
Right.
appreciate
Yeah.
people go spend money and buy hamburgers and
Right.
clothes.
And so actually that leads me to the other question. Is there going to be a place down here that we would have like a food vendor area?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
There are, again, there's a full presentation I'm not getting into, but we have 2 stations here that are licensed. We're hoping that food vendors will be coming here that have water and electricity in these spaces. So we hope that's a growing phenomenon.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, one other piece of it, which is more the full presentation. This is one of the other major focus for the project is making this a 12-month-a-year place. And then we know it rains there, but we're going to try to get cold and we have a lot of people doing winter things. The forest now has as many people in the winter as the summer through a kind of aggressive approach to activities.
And you did a great job in the Forks. I grew up there in Winchester.
Okay, cool.
And it looks very nice.
So I guess from the council question.
Again, with the water park, has anyone adapted to flow through to use the water afterwards for irrigation?
That's a very good question. I will look into that. Yeah, I think it's very good.
Councilor Kennedy?
Just a quick point is you mentioned that it's marina revitalization and downtown revitalization. And you notice to the sidewalks coming down from the downtown. Well, hopefully we don't lose sight as well. We're trying to get people that come to the marina to go to our downtown
Yes.
and services as well.
Yes, and we've talked, again, there's a lot of internal discussion on this but certainly people come from the federal lot, which is the major transit people, they arrive here right now and say, where do I go now? So we hope that it really creates a network for them to begin to get deeper in the town. We've talked, but not as aggressively as we probably should have yet, but an issue of the bus transport and a loop on the normal bus route, especially in the summer, this whole year, it would be better to come down, take a loop back up and get, so this becomes an easy connection.
And if I can, just a quick, not suggestion, but a strong suggestion of one of the open houses, I think, an information booth.
Yes.
To direct people to our downtown.
Yeah, the mechanics is actually we were talking about. The town is not prepared by current discussions to go hire someone who's going to sit behind a window and give advice, but hoping that we can have a marriage between the commercial entities that will be there and duties of being the friendly face of the law.
It's already being done to some extent at Federal Docks, but that'd be a discussion that the VIA could have with them as well. All right, thank you for your presentation. So we'll let that clear away, and then we'll get on with the other delegations. All right, so next delegation, and we have 3 of them in regards to 85 Jane Place. First on the list is Leon and Shelley Gomer. If you come to the podium, and you can make your views known to council.
And, Mr. Mayor, I'm very conflict of interest.
Due to adjacent property owners?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you to all the councilors that came over and visited our home and kind of looked at what the issues are up there. Our main position regarding this development is unchanged. It's always been that the bylaws and the rules that were in place for the community in the previous 14 years that we've lived there, 15 years. It's always been explained to us that there, post when the accretion happened, that
was in 2010.
in 2010, that there would be a small building site available, and at every time there was a change or upon finding out the place was for sale, we went down and we talked to town planners, to Marvin, and basically found that things hadn't changed, that there was a small building site available, and it was a small legal conforming building site. And that the message that I got, and Marvin has assured me on this a few times, is that the same message that he's relayed to the use and to everybody, to the community, and that yes, you're able to build there, you have to be a small building that you have to use your imagination and be creative, but you could build there. And you know, we never saw it as being a threat to basically to our value of our property or our enjoyment of the property, because where this legal conforming building site is it's not in an area that would affect hugely affect us. And as explained to Colin, he's first time I met him, that had he, you know, if he builds in that legal conforming building site, we have no objection to that. We do not agree to the variance of the floodplain exemption should allow a building that is not within a build envelope, as just described. That these exemptions that are being applied for are, in our opinion, extreme. With the floodplain exemption and the backyard setback, it's an 80% exemption, and I don't think anybody in this town or in this room would want to see that in their backyard. That, okay, now what you thought were the bylaws are thrown out the window, and you know what, anything goes in Comox. You can pretty much come in and ask for whatever you want, and you may get it. That being said, we're originally coming here tonight to further express our objections, which I kind of have. to this development. However, after reading the report last evening, we've been seeking further information again today regarding the changes to the application. And we see that there are some new building restrictions, and we were seeking clarification on those. Shelley spoke with Nina today. Bob and Jan Lindsay spoke with Marvin the other day, and both were verbally told the same thing. Unfortunately for us, reading the documents, the verbal description does not match the written description. In the written description, let me put it this way, the verbal description is that the height of the building is proposed is 5.65 meters from the average existing grade. Now, I don't...
We just really need clarification totally on that before we can totally consider that, because whatever is going to happen there is going to have a huge impact on our property value.
Who are you speaking to here?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you asking staff for something? Because we would have to ask them for that. But you should be speaking to council.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Whatever happens here, we'll have a big impact on this.
Yes.
And we need that clarification.
Okay.
So that's what-
Part of the description all along in there, that's where I was glad to see some of the councillors come around and visit us, because the descriptions in the report, they've been consistent all along. It's not just the report, but it's always been that, you know, if we tuck up against this bank, it will have no effect on it, basically. But the fact is that it's not this giant bank, it's not a cliff. You're not going to hang glide off this thing. It's a slope, and not only is it a slope, but we have we've been working on a garden area down below that to us is our backyard space, just like your backyard space would be in your neighborhood. And that is important to us. So this perception that it's just this slope that if you tuck in against it, it's not going to affect anybody, it's not our view. In light of how much time we've had to put into this matter and how complex the issues are to us and our neighbors, we request that council delay making a decision on this request for 2 weeks to give us a small amount of time to consider the new information in the DBP 15-2 report. We also request that the height of the building as described by the planning department be cast in stone in a written, irrevocable document. To provide assurance that the height as described in the report will not change. It appears to us to have been a moving target. I mean, the staff, the planning department have been very helpful in trying to explain it. But it has been kind of a moving target. You know, there's been discrepancies in this thing. And we would just, changes in it, yes, and we would just really like to nail it down. What is it, and how will this affect us? So if we could have some sort of an irrevocable document that says, here's what it is, from the existing grade, not from geodetic levels, because there's also other things. We've had a BC land surveyor come down and measure the property, and some of the information that is
Not measured.
not
Their property.
No, but measure the heights from our property, which they have the technology to do that now, as I'm sure you're aware. And he believes that the information being used is from 1.5 geodetic, which is not accurate for Comox Harbor. It is more like 2 or 2 and change, whatever that is, I'm not sure. But again, it means that the building height can be in question, because if the ground level has to be raised because of the height of the ocean, and you now have a house that's going on top of that, again, you're coming up higher. So again, I just ask that we have some time. I'd like to ask that.
Okay, well, council will be discussing this later in the meeting, and if there's any clarifications that council needs from staff on those or other issues, we can get them, but unless there's anything further, 10 minutes are
That's it.
kind of- So we'll hear if there's any questions, though, from members of council before you go.
Thank you.
Seeing none. Oh, Councilman McKinnon, you have a question for the delegation?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just thank you for your presentation. Just to confirm what I heard correctly, you're asking a delay of 2 weeks to process the information because you just received it today? Or
Yes.
yesterday?
Yes.
After 3 o'clock, the report came out, and that's when the height restriction was there, and that's 5.65 meters from ground level, and we learned about clarification on that. Last night when we read it, we thought that would be on top of whatever fill or material needed to go in, and so we were again like, well, where are we at? What will we be looking at here? So we sought the clarification.
All right, well, we'll
Today-
explore that a little bit later in the meeting.
Still-
So you need clarification, obviously, we'll need some clarification, so we'll deal with that shortly.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I don't think so. All right, so we have a second delegation, and this is, just on our agenda page here, Carol Barrett and Dave Holm. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight about development variance permit application 1502. Our issues have been outlined in the detailed briefing note that Liam Bomer sent you last week, and we do not have time tonight to review them with you. To start, I'd like to comment on the process. We've understood for a number of months that there would be approximately 24 hours between the time the agenda package was made public and the council meeting. What we didn't anticipate is how little time that would allow for us to respond to the planning report. As mentioned by the Bomers, we feel there's additional information in that report that we did not understand or were not provided, wasn't clear to us, and it's raised questions for us. This is a very important issue for us. We've spent countless hours over the last 8 months trying to understand the impact and think about what this means to our investment in our property and our enjoyment of our property. We just feel that that this process does not allow adequate time, given that we've had no indication prior to yesterday around a number of items in the report. And I would like to talk about a couple of items in the report. In discussions with Marvin Kamens regarding the development application, he explained that council had granted his position the authority and bylaw to make decisions regarding exemptions to the floodplain bylaw. But he also had told us that because the combined exemptions in this particular application were so significant, he'd be taking both the zoning variances and the floodplain variance exemption to council as a package. It is only in reading the planning report that we found that the plan is now to have the decision on the floodplain exemption made by Marvin following council's decision on the bylaw variances. While technically correct, it is not consistent with what we were told the process would be, and we wonder why that has been changed. We think separating the two approval processes minimizes the total scope of the exemptions and variances being sought. It is only if he gets approval for both the 67% rear yard setback variance and a floodplain exemption of up to 7.5 meters that Mr. Eves can build on his preferred location. We have heard there is a goal to achieve a public walkway as part of this project, but the planning report says it cannot be considered as part of the DBP 1502 application. It feels like this is the elephant in the room. We are not worried about the development of a walkway as contemplated in the official community plan, but we are worried that behind the scenes, the prospect of a dedication to create a walkway is a consideration in recommending approval of the rear yard variances. And we don't know if this was the reason the decision was made to separate the zoning variance from the floodplain variance in the way that it's been done. In the application on page 57, Mr. Eves dates, approval of the rear yard setback variance will move the house back from the high tide mark, preserving a sense of open space to pedestrians at the tide line. In fact, the conforming building site is farther from the shoreline and would provide more space to the tide line. Ultimately, I don't think pedestrians are going to be concerned about this issue, and it feels like, to us, like a reframing of Mr. Eve's desire to have tide markers further away from his house. In April, we asked Marvin directly if the proposed building site with the rear yard setback variances was preferable to the conforming building site for the development of a future walkway, and he said definitely not, because any walkway would be within the 7.5 meter front yard setback. If a possible walkway designation is not a factor to be considered in the decision as the granting of the DVP, for the granting of the DVP, what in the application would justify the approval of such a large variance against the strong objections of the property owners whose rear yards abut the variance area?
Mr. Eves has a right to develop this property, and we think development of the site is positive for the neighborhood. Planning staff has suggested we should be seeking compromise with Mr. Eves. From the first time Mr. Eves approached us regarding his plans, we have been consistent. He should build on his conforming building site. Small variances to accommodate a reasonable plan could be discussed if needed. It is hard to find a compromise when the expectation is that we agree to the house being 80% off the conforming building site. In his application on page 57, Mr. Eves states the 60-70% variance to the rear yard setback is in order to mitigate the impact of the house on the view lines of the adjacent neighbors. We think the uncertainties around the final elevation of the house and the proximity to our rear yards will create different problems. We would prefer that he build his house on his building site rather than characterizing his site preferences as something being proposed for our benefit. He states that because the property is narrow, it limits his ability to build on the property, but the proposed building site is on the narrower part of the property. We have always expected that development of our property had to conform to the bylaws, and we thought we had a reasonable expectation that the bylaws would apply to our neighbors too. This process has been incredibly stressful for us over the past 8 months. Everyone we have told about this proposal has expressed shock that the town would consider accommodating such significant variances. The common response is why? We too are trying to understand what would be the rationale for setting aside the bylaws. We want to emphasize our concern about the kind of precedent this sets and the uncertainty the scale of variance creates for other property owners. The limitations of this property were clear when Mr. Eves purchased it, and the purchase price reflected those limitations. His application lays out his vision for the property, but we are here to tell you that that vision is seriously flawed, and we will be the ones who will suffer the long-term consequences of those flaws. We respectfully request that you deny the variance application and advise Mr. Eves that he needs to come up with a plan that puts his house in a conforming building site. As an alternative, we support the Boehmer's request for a delay of the decision, along with a direction for planning staff to work with us to explain what is being recommended in the planning report, so we can determine if the impacts can be mitigated to our satisfaction. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for members of council? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation. Now we have the next delegation, Colin Eves and John Gower. You're both named on the submission, but whoever wishes to speak, or both of you still have the same 10 minutes left.
Good evening. I don't have a lot to say. I'm happy to answer any questions. The issue of the building height, I'm not sure where it came from. We had submitted this final plan to the town, to the planning department, I believe, in anticipation that we'd be appearing before the August meeting. And I understand that that would have been available to the public at any time after we handed it over to the planning department. And as far as I'm concerned, and I'm aware there'd be no changes to the height of the building. In terms of the other issues raised, We've contended all along that having a low house that was pushed close up the bank would have a minimal impact on the view lines from the upper lots, and I anticipated that would have been the greatest concern for the people on Beaufort who were above us. I still think that's the case. Our original plan was had a roof line of 7.1 meters above ground level, and we've reduced that in our subsequent plan to 5.6. So we took what was a fairly unobtrusive plan and dropped it by 1.5 meters in height. The bank behind there is about 9 meters above sea level. I'm talking heights above sea level here. So in any event, it would not be projecting above the slope and therefore would not be visible from the houses on Beaufort above it. We think that we proposed a modest building that is compatible with the neighborhood, that is being designed with sensitivity to the people around it. It will be a good complement to Jane Place and Beaufort, and I still believe that is the case. John is our house designer. He could probably speak to some of the specifics of the plan itself. In terms of the issue that I think was raised, accuracy of surveys and geodetic data is kind of beyond my abilities to respond to. So if we had the lot surveyed by Dave Bassett Surveying, and we went with the information he provided.
All right. Sorry, John, you go ahead. I thought Marvin was waving. Not yet.
I would just like to address the alternate possibility of building within the allowable building envelope on that site. And it's a very constrained site. It's constrained by the floodplain setback on one side and by the fact that it's unusual for a waterfront lot in Comox in that it runs parallel to the shoreline. Most waterfront lots are designed so that the front setback and the rear setback are in from the street and in from the water line. The impact on this site means that you have a very small leftover triangle of land that is completely buildable without requiring a variance. So we explored initially the possibility of putting a home within that small triangle of land. Because the footprint of that is so small, we would have been forced to have a 2 or a 2.5 story home quite a ways out from the bank, much higher house. I'm not sure what the zoning allows for a maximum height, but it would be probably a 9 meter, so we would be allowed to go up to 9 meters and we would be further out from the bank. So it really was I mean, we won't deny that there's...
John, if you could speak to us.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll not deny that there's an advantage to the eaves of being able to spread out across the site and have more exposure to the view and to the water. But it is certainly true that it is much less intrusive to build there than to build within the existing footprint that would be allowed by the bylaw. So I think it's kind of a win-win. We initially proposed a 2-story scheme based on some initial geotechnical work that was done in the winter and spring, and the building was a high building, and people had good reason to be concerned that it would be appearing within their view over the top of the bank. So we went back, we got another opinion on the geotech. We lowered the house by 2 or 3 meters, and we changed the slope of the roof to be more parallel with the lay of the land, so that unless somebody is standing on the edge of the bank, the house should be practically invisible. And that's been the goal here, to really minimize that impact.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members of the council? Councillor.
So it's your contention that the house will not be above the bank?
Yes.
That was question, and you answered my second question, which was about building on the already the building site that's already there.
Yeah.
My assumption was that you would have to go up, which would block the view from 1770 and probably across the street on Jane Place almost entirely. So it will be below the bank, and that was the restriction on the building site itself. Am I correct with that?
I don't quite
So
understand.
the house that you're building will be below the height of the bank?
Yes, it will.
And if you were to have to build under the site that's there, you would have to go up to get any kind of reasonable square
We
footage?
would, particularly if we wanted to have covered parking as well, it would be, we would fill that envelope and it would be 2.5 stories high.
Thank you.
You say that the height will be below the height of the bay? By
Correct.
how much?
By 1 to 1.5 meters.
1 to below?
Below the 9-meter elevation, which our survey plan shows as the top of the bank.
All right, thanks. All right, seeing no further questions, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, you've got Councillor Swift, because we have one more delegation. All right, so next delegation is Chris Giroux and/or Jane Morris.
I'm really only here to answer questions.
Thank you, Chris.
I don't have anything to say.
All right. If there are any questions, you will have to come to the podium, but otherwise, I don't know if council has any questions. I just like what you put on the delegation request. Primary purpose of organization, mother raising 2 children. I knew that wasn't you, Chris. All right, we'll consider your matter later in the meeting. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on with just some housekeeping items here. Minutes of meetings. We have the regular council meeting minutes of October 7th for approval.
Move. Second.
For approval, then all those in favor? Motion's carried. Committee of the whole meeting minutes of October 14th for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Receipt, then all in favor? Motion's carried. 2 recommendations. First one that we'll consider here this evening is that the fire prevention regulation bylaw be amended. Permit a 7-day burning period between April 1 and 7 each year for properties over 10 acres or 4 hectares in the ALR that have farm status, and further, following conditions applied to the fires, the property owner will be required to obtain a permit from the fire department including dates, size, allowable material to be burned, and safety regulations. The size of the fires be limited to 1 cubic meter at a time. The number of fires be limited to 1 fire per property. Is there a mover for that?
I would like to move that this green recommendation be approved.
Okay, so it's been moved, seconded, for discussion. Seconded, discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Kim.
Yes, I have a question in regards to enforcement. I'd like our CAO to inform council is that if somebody's in violation of the requirements here, what is the fine right now for?
I think there's between $100 to $500.
Currently, the fines for violation of these and other provisions of the bylaw are generally around $100. There's also a schedule in the bylaw that allows the fire chief or bylaw enforcement officer to recover costs if the fire department is called out to put out a fire that is not permitted or not in compliance. And those fees are considerably higher in that schedule.
Okay, with all due respect, $100 sounds pretty low, and I would think that, boy, if I was a farmer there and I had this stuff to dispose of, certainly paying $100 fines cheaper than transporting all that stuff to the dump in Cumberland. I'm wondering if it might be appropriate to have an amendment to increase the fine for not following regulations.
Well, that's the current situation. Is that the same bylaw? Is it different?
It's the same. The fire prevention.
All right, well, we can consider that as an amendment if you have a specific amendment to bring forward.
I would suggest $750 as a fine for not following the appropriate steps that the fire department requests.
You're referring to this specific
And
situation?
that would be a deterrent.
No, your amendment would only be for this specific allowance that we're giving.
That's correct.
not generally speaking.
We're trying to help the farmers in one sense, but we want to see that there's
So
they're following
if
the
there was a
requirements.
violation of this, that the fine would be $750 plus the other costs. if
Plus
there
the
were.
other.
I'll throw that on the table.
Okay, so that's been moved as an amendment. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Second that. Okay. On the amendment, any discussion?
I'm just wondering if this, rather than not passing this tonight, because even though I think it should be 3, because anyway, I won't get into that.
We're speaking to the amendment.
I know, I just had to throw that in there. But, you know, rather than throwing an arbitrary number of 750 out, I think, could we not bring this back at another date with a more refined version of what we're doing? Well, that's what I mean, I don't want to, I understand what he's saying, and it makes sense. I'm just, it seems kind of arbitrary that we throw a number out. Sure. So.
Okay, so if, let's say it costs $500 for the fire department to come out, salaries, fuel, and so on. Could we not keep the fine what it is now and then just take that on top of it? I mean,
That's what would happen.
yeah, so, I mean, then you're getting what you want without making any amendments to it. You know, and then it would be the discretion of the fire chief. And I think he should have a little bit of discretion.
Diego?
May I suggest that is when we bring forward an amendment to the fire prevention bylaw, we also bring a report or give consideration to what the current enforcement is, taking into some of the discussion here and see if there is a need at that time. Because if we have cost recovery in place right now, the discussion about the dollar.
We'll see the full bylaw at that point. Right now, we're just passing a recommendation that the bylaw be drafted in such a way. So we wouldn't necessarily be, even if we said 750 tonight, that wouldn't be actually in effect until we pass the bylaw.
And that was my point, maybe we should.
All right, so on the amendment, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any those opposed? Amendment's defeated. So back to the motion. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to clarify, so we have a 7-day burning period. Does that mean the first day they can start a fire and keep it going for 7 days? Or is it a 24-hour? It just wasn't clear on that. Or 12-hour, whatever it might be.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, normally the way that fires work is you have to have it staffed the whole time. Somebody has to be there, and the size of the fire is usually limited, so you have to be constantly feeding.
Yeah.
I would have to defer to the fire chief as to how else he
Yeah.
enforces that. And again, that's something that we could look at as part of this amendment.
Yeah, sorry, it just dawned on me as we were talking about it, and I wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Councilor McKinnon.
Just one additional thing for consideration is that we're opening the door here to give this a trial basis if this motion passes. I'd like to suggest we try this for a year, get some feedback from the fire chief after that year and see if it worked. If it didn't work, perhaps revisit the motion here.
Wait, if we do amend the bylaw, it'll be in effect until we amend it again. So you could amend it at any time. You don't put in generally a sunset clause on an amendment.
No. But to clearly state this is a trial basis for 1 year, and then we come back and review it next year.
Well, I would imagine that the fire chief would let us know that it's a problem.
That was it. If he's having problems, I'm sure we'll hear about it.
So I don't know, when we get to seeing this, which probably next month, then we'll presumably pass it, and then it'll be April next year, and then if there's any big issues, we'll know about it soon enough, I'm sure.
You've got till April to get it right.
Yes. Anything further on the recommendation then? So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion's carried, and staff will bring that forward in due course in the usual bylaw process. Second item was around the pickleball courts and the request for a letter of support and endorsement of grant application to receive your grant.
Move that.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And I know that Mr. Chambers is quite anxious, so in terms of that letter, hopefully we can get that signed and delivered, maybe pick it up tomorrow, because he has to submit it by Friday. Great. Okay, manager report, and is the next item for receipt.
Move receipt.
All proceed. All those in favor? Motion's carried. We've got the presentation, and we'll be considering the marina project next week in further detail in terms of budgets and other items. And I just wanted to point out the fixed wing search and rescue thing. Of course, we just had an election, so I'm writing a letter to our new MP-elect to hopefully get a meeting to kind of get some sense, to provide some information to that new MP-elect on that project as a federal matter that is of some importance. So that will be something, well, we'll see how soon we can get a meeting. Obviously, there's a bit of a learning curve going to happen there for the new MPs.
That's a big one for the valley.
Yes, absolutely.
Be very, be a hard one to get our teeth wet on, but a good one to get started.
No, it is one that FCM in Niagara Falls. I did give a rather informal briefing with one of the other mayors to that meeting that we had with then leader, now Prime Minister designate, about that, and at least one of his staff members did take some notes. So I know he's got a few other issues to deal with, but there was an awareness piece there too. So. Okay, so nothing further on the management report. We have the minutes of the regional district board
Receipt?
for receipt, and that was both hospital board and regular board.
No receipt of all of them.
Okay, thank you. And all those in favor? Motion's carried. I know that the hospital one was a strat planning session. I know that perhaps you'll provide those reports on that session at the council report section, but is there anything, I didn't see anything in the minutes, obviously there's not a whole lot there in the minutes to sink your teeth into, so you'll tell us all about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you all about it.
Excellent. All right, so that's been done, and now, yes, Comox Reserve Funds bylaw, 1819 is before us for adoption.
Move adoption.
Second. Any further discussion? Everything clarified by the inspector last week, that's great. Okay, all those in favor? Motion's carried. That one then is now in effect. All right, under new business, we do have a presentation that would appear from our planner on 85 Jane Place. So you have the floor, and I know that Councillor Swift will have to take note.
Thank you. And as part of this presentation, we have some new technical information in terms of data that we have with the recent flyover from new ortho photos. We also got something that's called LiDAR, and that LiDAR is giving us the ability to provide cross-sections, very accurate cross-sections through different properties. So when I get to that in the report, I'll just pass it over to Ian to walk you through those drawings. Knows a lot more about computers than I do. So, and that way if you have any questions on that, talk to the person who knows exactly what goes on. The presentation outlined today is on the development variance permit application, broken down into 4 sections: location and land use context, application summary, issue analysis, and then mitigating measures. I'll also add in now at the end in terms of, since there's been some concern about absolutes and how that would be regulated in things like building height, I'll just go through the updated Schedule 1 development variance permit conditions that are proposed that was distributed earlier. Land use context, so yes, we are of course talking about a waterfront lot down in here, subject property 85 Jane Place. The OCP land use designation for the upland properties and for this property is tourist commercial. So essentially the single family usages that are there today over the long term it is anticipated that will then change over through rezoning for tourist commercial development. So it's anticipated there will be changes within the neighborhood in terms of its character. Current zoning is R1.1 single family. The proposed development variance permit is to The rear setback, which is the north setback lot line right here, is to change that rear setback from 7.5 meters to 2.4 meters for the principal building. So that's the single-family dwelling. So given that it's waterfront, automatically wherever you're on waterfront, it's along the frontage of the water, becomes the front lot line, opposite is the rear. So hence, north lot line is the rear lot line. The other proposed variance is exterior side setback, which is the lot lines that are adjacent to Jane Street or Jane Place. It's down through here. And that is to reduce it for an accessory building, i.e. the detached carport, from 3.5 meters to 1.4 meters. In terms of what currently is allowed and how this changes with floodplain, any floodplain variance, what you'll see in this diagram right here is the dashed area. So that's the buildable area based on the existing zoning and a reduction in the floodplain setback to 7.5 meters. It is currently in the bylaw 15.0 meters. If the given it with a 15.0 meter setback, floodplain setback, and it shrinks down to the orange area. Floodplain regulations are set out specifically in regards to protection of property, persons and properties from flood damage. So there is a minimum habitable floor elevation for any goods that are susceptible to flood damage. There's also a setback, and that setback is to allow for erosion, and it's also to allow for in terms of floodway. On something like Comox Harbor, there is no floodway. The applications can be submitted to municipalities like the town of Comox for an exemption, and then that is then analyzed based on a site-specific geotech report in terms of minimum flood elevation and minimum setbacks based on exactly how the water dynamics are in front of this property. So, and yes, that has been submitted to reduce the setback to 7.5 meters. It's being processed on a staff level. The implications in terms of this development variant permit are very much identified in the report in terms of the waterfront walkway, i.e. they have no bearing on the development variance permits before you right now, because in no way do they impact what the variance is for. So the variance is not for variance in terms of zoning from a front setback closer to the water. The variance is from the rear setback, which is closest to the north lot line. Similarly, the variance here is from Jane Place. So there are limits in terms of council's discretion and what they can look at in terms of the different applications, and it really comes down to what the intent of the legislation or the regulation is, and you have to keep within those bounds. In a nutshell, the issues really are unique siting constraints of the subject property and balancing the privacy and property enjoyment of upland properties versus those of the subject property. When we took a look at it, that was our conclusion of, if we boiled everything down. So the subject property itself, so 85 James Place, you can see it right here. It's an atypical single-family lot. It does have a waterfront location, but it is adjacent to a sewage pump station, a major regional sewage pump station, right here. It's also relatively long and narrow. It's irregular shape. It doesn't have normally even rectangle sides, and it has limited road access in terms of where it actually runs. The upland properties. So on the upland properties, you do have a bank, and it has a relatively sharp rise along the southern portion of this bank. It goes up to approximately 6 meters, and then it transitions into a gentle slope. When you're looking at anything like this in terms of upslope property owners, you also, people are very hesitant to look up, is really what it comes down to. People do not like looking up at other people. They don't like that level of surveillance. So any activity that does occur on the steep slope going down does have a direct impact on the outdoor privacy of the downslope property. So there is that impact. There's also, of course, the impact of anything in an area like this. If you go above that slope or that rise in this direction, you're going to have an impact in terms of light and in terms of views from the rear yard open space and from the south elevations of the properties. So on LiDAR, with the recent flyover, not only do we get things like ortho photos which show building locations, there's also, based on light speed transmission, we get three-dimensional representation of the actual development on the properties. And so what we were able to do was to run cross-sections. Each cross-section is looking to the east, so we'll be looking this way. And they run, starting on the most westerly property that's abutting 1723, they just run in sequence to Jane Street, and they run through the homes and then down through the subject properties. And with that, I'll even explain what the little colors mean coming through, and just walk you through each one.
Good evening. I don't know why Marvin thinks I know more about this. LiDAR is light detection and ranging. I don't know how it works. But it gives us pretty good images through any point in town where we put our line. So, as Marvin just said, the perpendicular profiles of each property from Beaufort Avenue. We even had some glimpses of the street lights, so we were able to put the Beaufort Avenue and property lines pretty accurately. They are still approximate, so plus minus a couple of centimeters, and approximate location of the north wall line of Jane Place. Here is where the water already starts. We are looking east from the 1723 Beaufort Avenue property. Again, this is Beaufort Avenue pavement. This is the front yard of that property, little hedging, some vegetation. This is the outline of the roof where the light hit their backyard, and slope, top of the slope approximate foot, and then relatively flat portion of the land. The colors signify the height. The colder the colors, the lower it is. The higher, these are trees, the higher it is. It is difficult to see, but this line is approximately 3 meters, presumably geodetic. And the next slide. Again, the same 1719 Beaufort Avenue property. We have the street, the front yard with the landscaping, house, some landscaping, and the slope, which is vegetated at this point. The alders on the lower lot, and flat, relatively flat area. 1713, the same story. This is where Beaufort Avenue ends, the front yard, the house, the backyard, and the sloped area of the backyard. This is where the property line is. This little shape is actually the existing cabin, and the trees on the subject property, the water. And the next one is 1707 Beaufort Avenue. And starting from Beaufort Avenue, the Jane Place is behind, parallel. Property line of 85 Jane Place. The existing cabin we can see better in this shot, and this is where actually the pump house is.
So in the proposal, with the proposed variances built into the single-family building design, there's a number of factors that mitigate potential impacts upslope. This is not to scale when we start getting into these samples. It's just to show quickly the concepts behind. So the first one, of course, is maximum building height. Below the bank, so if you have the existing views going straight out, and then the existing view essentially from the rear of the building, the ground floor, going down, the higher you are, and if you go over the bank, the more the impact. it's going to be. So in this case, it's just showing, hey, listen, if you're below the bank, you might be then having the view, the bottom of your view angle down this area. The second that you go in here, well, above the bank, you start really restricting the views in terms of this water area in there. Other aspect is, again, as you take a building of an existing size, as you start moving it closer and closer to the bank, just due to the angles, what happens is the closer you go, the more you preserve the existing view angle. And then not shown on here, but shown on in your package. What's being proposed on the building is very minimal windows on the north side and a real strong elevation to the south, which is the waterfront. In regards to these mitigating factors, it is recognized that it's really tied to the specific proposal. And for that reason, there are proposed conditions of any variance approval to tie it to these proposals, but still allow for things like if somebody wants to put in a garden or something, they don't have to come back and go through a process like this, tying that type. And I'll just walk through those. The first is that the construction of the single-family dwelling and carport would be required to be in conformance with the site plan and elevation drawings. So if it's not in conformance with the site plan and elevation drawings, then it would not be permitted. They'd have to come back here for either build within the existing without the zoning variances, or come back for an amendment to their non-variance permit. Also then, in terms of those variances, that the minimum rear yard setback is only being varied for the single-family dwelling, but only for that. I can go back. So, the idea that this variance of a reduction from 7.5 to 2.5 meters would be specified to be only for the single-family dwelling, so essentially the setback would then pop back out this way. Similarly, the minimum exterior side setback would be specific to the carport, this carport design, so the 3.5 meter setback would essentially pop, would be held in here, and then would follow this contour and come back down. The height and story, so that it would be limited to a maximum, even though it's shown it's in the drawings, it would be a specific statement that it's limited to a maximum of 1 story. Furthermore, what is being shown on the drawings has a height from average grade. Our bylaw is very specific. All building heights are taken from average, in this case, natural grade or existing grade, keeping the length of time. So what happens is a building is, when it comes in for a building permit application, we get the elevations of the 4 corners. We then take an average. That becomes an artificial grade line. Everything is measured from that. If you take that artificial grade line, for example, under the current 9 meters maximum building height, you put 5 meters of fill on it, congratulations, you just reduced how much building you can have because that maximum height did not change. What is being proposed is, given the building drawings themselves show 5.57 meters measured from that average grade line. It is recognized that you do drawings, and they don't necessarily always work when you're on site. There is a little bit of a fudge factor. Originally, we had proposed to go up to 5.65 absolute maximum, and that's to the peak of any projection on the building other than things like chimneys. That would give about 2 to 3 inches fudge factor, which is a little tight for a building of that size. So that's why the recommendation has been now to the absolute maximum of 5.75 meters. It gives us 7 inches fudge factor. So that is built into the conditions, should you choose to follow them. Also, the west interior side setback for buildings, other than accessory buildings, to have it as a minimum of 25 meters, i.e., Because of the way this thing is currently oriented, this is an interior side under the existing zoning bylaw. It has a 2-meter setback for principal buildings. It's single family, so yes, it's tied to the drawings, but just to be crystal clear, that it is increased for principal buildings to 25 meters between setback buildings in this line. Specifically excluded are the normal accessory buildings in R 1.1 zone property, which would be things like ancillary sheds, gardens, trellises, and those items that we have in mind. And there is also, in terms of rationalization, given that the setbacks are being played with, rationalization in terms of projection allowances for things like gutters and leaves built into the proposed development variance conditions. And with that, if there's any questions, we have those.
So, a couple of the delegations in opposition had expressed concern around clarification. Was it around the building height issue? That was the concern being raised, and something was just raised in the last couple of days. I know we've got some information around the 5.75 now. What other clarifications? Are you aware that there's...
There was, in terms of our conversations with people, there was request for clarification in terms of what happens with accessory buildings, what exactly is being buried, and that's why the clarifications are presented. In terms of the comments raised today regarding building heights, at time of the notification, we now are required to notify 13 days prior to council consideration of the development variance permit application. Those drawings are, by law, then made available to the public. Those showed the existing heights. There may be some confusion because their height measurements are given relative to the average grade. There are also some geodetic measurements in there that are coming from the surveyor plans, and that may confuse members of the public. But in terms of what is being proposed and the maximum building height that the applicant proposed, that has been set and is quite clear in the drawings.
And nothing's changed in the plans since they were submitted in August? What the other delegations? Thanks. Councilor Grant.
So the Bombers and we're looking for some assurance that this house would not go above the bank. And I heard you say that when they give elevation drawings, your words kind of confuse me every now and again, so maybe you could go back over that. But once they give you the elevation drawings and that application is done, they have that assurance that that is the height that the house will be built. That's what they were asking for.
If council issues the permit and sets those conditions, then that assurance is given. What we would then do is, when somebody comes in for a building permit, we would then say, congratulations, we want to see the elevations at the corners. What are those elevations? We'll take what are the calculations to determine the average, and we'll take all measurements in terms of the cross sections relative to that actual. So what I'm saying is, council changes the rules by the development variance permit and sets that requirement in. At time of building permit, then we will require the applicant to show the actual elevations and cross sections. And if there is any then concern, what happens on buildings and its standard practice, is if we have a concern regarding building height, so we'll go out on site and, hey, look, it doesn't really look like we got on the drawings, then we'll actually get the applicant to get a BCLS to shoot the height of the actual roof line ridge. So it's pretty, yes, it is pretty tight. As tight as we can make it.
Okay, so are you saying we would have to tell you that's what we want, or are you telling me that that's what's already in there?
That's in the report recommendations. If you adopt the report recommendations, that's built in.
Okay. Any more questions for the planner? Councilor McKinnon?
Yes, Mayor Ives, I need your help here, your advice. I heard from the delegation earlier that they were asking for a delay of 2 weeks because they just received information yesterday. And I don't have any way of really knowing whether the planner's presentation this evening clarified, and you touched on it briefly, whether he answered their questions fully. Otherwise, I'd be prepared to entertain their motion if is there a way that we can find out whether those questions were answered.
I don't know.
In the hope that clear information
we should come back to the table here and have a discussion. If you're finished with the planner's discussion, you can deliberate as a council. Whether you want to pass it or not pass it or defer it, that'll be up to council.
I brought it up now because before the planner leaves,
Well, he's still here, he's not leaving you. But if you want to come back to the table, then we can have a discussion. I don't think that's a question he can answer at the moment. All right, so the planner has provided a presentation, provided a report, and of course a recommendation. So unless there's further questions of the planner, we could entertain a motion.
I'll read the motion.
As recommended?
Yes.
So that's EVP be issued subject to the conditions listed in Schedule 1. And the planner report on EVP 15-D. So it's been moved in second. Discussion. Councilor Price.
Yes, and it is complex, and there's a lot in this report, and I was appreciating the clarification on the measurements being from the existing
average
grade. And I think that was one of the concerns that the neighbourhood had, is because of the need to increase the ground level to do the protection, flood protection. I share Councillor McKinnon's concern that I too would like to know whether there is that a comfort in the neighbourhood, albeit that we looked to the neighbours for their comments, and it's ultimately our decision. I certainly much prefer to make a decision where it is a sense that people have come together and reached some sort of agreement that we can live with this. And I am getting the sense from the neighbourhood that this could well be the case, which is, I think, a much better place to come from, and that they would like that time to actually sit down with the planner. I think the message worth getting through today, I mean, after reading the report and talking to the planner, that concern about where exactly the base measure is, is still out there. So I would support the delay for 2 weeks if that is required to have more clarification in the neighbourhood. It has been going on since April, and certainly just reading through the 100 pages in our report.
Sorry, so you have a motion to table for 2 weeks?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Been moved to second and tabling it for 2 weeks. No real debate on that other than time and place.
Next council meeting.
2 weeks time. Okay.
Just time and place.
That's the beauty of the piano one. All those in favor? Those opposed?
I don't see the point in it, actually.
Well, I'm opposed to tabling it, so it's defeated, so we can discuss it further. Now, the motion hasn't been tabled, so it's still on the floor for discussion.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify there. So as Councillor Price said, if we increase the ground level from what the planner said, so through you to the planner, does that mean that the house height is reduced? So if in their building, and again I just put it in my layman terms here, their building, they need to bring in X number of yards of dirt to pack that in, and they rise it up by 3 feet, a meter, then the height of the house is going to be lower by that meter? Is that?
Well, it would have to be within the 5.75 meters.
So regardless, it's not going to make any difference of the height of the house. They're just going to have a shorter house.
Correct.
Right. And is that what the issue was, that people wanted to digest a little bit more? A little bit of that?
This has been a very ongoing process.
Right.
And so I don't know, I mean, they would only know what they need to digest or not digest.
Okay.
In terms of, we do have a number of slopes, we do have a number of waterfront view properties. That provision on how we calculate height
specifically instituted because of those issues, i.e. somebody doesn't get to fill their lot and that way take a 9-meter maximum building height and effectively make it 14 meters because they artificially filled the lot.
Okay.
And that's how the regulations have been designed to restrict that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the specific conditions are construction of a single-family dwelling and carport, performance of the site plan and elevation drawings. Exception that the minimum rear setback for the single-family dwelling will be 2.4 meters. Minimum exterior side setback for the carport, 1.4 meters, and heights and stories of a single-family dwelling shall not exceed 5.75 meters and 1 story. And it goes on to say about the west interior side setback for buildings other than accessory buildings shall be a minimum of 25 meters as shown on the diagram below. And then, of course, it talks about the allowances for awnings, sunshades, etc. So that's what we're voting on.
Well, when I look at the existing building site, and that's something that they talked about, and it seems to me that there isn't much room there, and it would be worse for the neighborhood should they build there, because the restriction is actually 9 meters. So you could actually go up 2.5 or almost 3 stories if you built on the existing site. And that was a concern they had. The other one is they wanted some assurance about height, and I think that in the recommendation the planner gave us, that assurance is there. And so, I mean, the question is, do you want him to build a house here or don't you? And I think that he's gone out of his way to try and conform this to the neighborhood and make it so that it fits nicely. So I would be in favor of this recommendation. I think he's done what he can, and I think the assurances are there for the neighborhood, so.
All right, Councillor Margaret?
Yes, I have concerns because of the extent of the exchange in the properties. That's poor choice of words. But because the zoning allowed this, and now as a result of this variable permit, it's a very large percentage of the property is now going to be rezoned. And it feels...
Not being rezoned.
Well, pardon me.
The land use is saying the variances would be granted to allow building in this location.
Yes, right. And that seems to me to be extreme. And also, upon walking through the properties, to see just exactly what is going to happen to those upland properties as a result of this building extending down as far as it is certainly going to compromise them. And the sunshine, the sunlight, and that shadow, and it's going to compromise their whole...
How is this?
Could be below them.
How is this?
Well, it will. If you walk down the property, Bomer's property, for example, is going to be terraced from their retaining wall and further up to the level of their home.
What's on the terracing?
That is a part of their plan. Part of it now has been planted and terraced with plants, and obviously that's their garden, because it is in fact the grass flat section extends only a short distance, and then from there, of course, it goes down, as we have seen.
So you're talking about shading on the garden.
And the shading on the garden, that's correct. Just to be clear. So it does seriously compromise their lifestyle as they have known it, and depended also on the zoning that was there, and this is such an extreme to it. I do have serious concerns in that regard.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, this property is a unique property. To build on it is difficult, and to build on a property, I guess there's been some choices made by the applicant to try to accommodate some of the concerns.
Yes, I agree. He has.
But as far as I can tell, the variances being sought, yes, they are rather extreme. We probably wouldn't be considering them in other situations, but this is a very unique property. So for anything to be built on this property is going to take some imagination. It's going to take some creativity, and obviously take some variances if it's going to be built on. Otherwise, you would end up with a building on that property which arguably would have a worse effect on the neighbors. So, I mean, I guess it's in the spirit of compromise, perhaps. Not everyone's going to agree in that neighborhood, but that's, I guess, our job here.
Okay.
Well, I'll just make a comment that we don't live in the neighborhood, and neighbors have to live with each other after the fact. And to me, I'm disappointed we didn't give another 2 weeks, because there's some new information that came to folks yesterday. sometimes people have to process that information, and with all due respect to the owner and developer, is that, and taking steps to make some changes there. Sometimes people need to take a step back, look at it, take a deep breath, and maybe both sides might have been able to come to an agreement, and in 2 weeks we would have passed this and everybody would have been happier. I think we've rushed it, and I'm disappointed in that. However,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, quite frankly, that there's really any new information here. The staff have brought forward some final considerations which basically tie the site up even more than it was previously by putting side yard setbacks and clarifying that 5.7 meters is the absolute cap on this. So I'm not sure what the misunderstanding is. If it's measurement from geodetic datum or whatever, that doesn't matter. It's what our bylaw refers to as average land grade. And that's what our planners said, and that's the criteria that we operate under. If other people are using different ways of measuring, it doesn't matter. This is the measurement that we're going to use and that we'll enforce in our building bylaw procedures. So I don't see any information here. I just see, if anything, the clarification tightens this up even more. But that's the way I see it.
fair enough, it is a unique property. However, I still stand by 2 weeks would have, I think would have.
Yeah, the other thing that the applicant said, of course, was that nothing's changed since the plans were submitted in August. So he hasn't changed his plans.
Yes, and I think it's more the understanding of the plans and definitely, you know, where the measurement of the ground is and assurances that it's not going to go over the bank. The applicant mentioned that it was anticipated that be 1 to 1.5 meters below the bank. Is that a feasible estimation? Can I ask that to the planner?
Our reviews indicated that no portion of the roof will project above that. We didn't go finer than that.
I think the original plan that he had was 7.1 meters and just reduced that to 5.6. So that was 1.5 meters less than what was originally proposed. And the bank, he indicated, is 9 meters above the level we're looking at here, as you saw on the LiDAR photo. So that may be where the 1.5 is coming from. But in any event, 5.6 or even 5.75 would be considerably less than the 9 meter bank level.
And just to finish, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's a difficult site, and I think it's a difficult project, and I think the neighbours bring up a very good point that it's very unusual for us to be looking at variances of this magnitude. It's probably maybe a once in a lifetime that this would happen. From meeting with the neighbours, my sense was the concern about the height and how much, you know, the assurances are written in that it is actually grade, and the neighbourhood, and including myself, are not technically brilliant. So, you know, to actually, you know, to be assured and to be confident that that is the case, that the 5.7 is actually from the ground that exists now. My sense is, and that's why I would have liked the 2 weeks or some ability just to check in with the neighbourhood. I'd prefer to move ahead with people on side. But my sense is that that is the assurance that people wanted. And on the basis of that, I will support it. I do think that the alternative of the 2-story, 2.5-story will have a more dramatic effect on views and lighting, and would be a less desirable outcome. It is an existing legal lot, and as such, the applicant has the right to develop it.
So are you looking for additional wording in this recommendation and the conditions in specific reference to 5.75 meters, or are you satisfied with the planner's explanation of how that's measured?
I mean, I think more that it's in writing. I'm thinking more like, you know, I trust our planner and his explanation, and
I'll turn over our planner. Is there any additional wording that you would suggest?
No. The condition is as clear as I could make it in terms of stating that maximum single-family building height is not to exceed 5.75. The definition of height is a defined term in the bylaw, and it goes back to a definition of grade. It's a defined term in the bylaw. As I said, this is a very sensitive issue in the town, and so they're very precise definitions, and to date, we have not had a challenge on those or a interpretation that is in any way doubting what they say and what they do. So I would caution council putting any additional words in there. It's tight, it's been legally reviewed.
All right. Councillor Arnott.
Yeah. Just going through this, and it was a large package, a lot of emails that we were able to review, but one of the emails that I did read, or it was perhaps a letter to town, was about the height of the trees, and the applicant is willing to put a covenant for the neighbors up above so that the trees could be kept at a certain height, which would lessen future impact for views. There's been, like I say, there's not a perfect answer to this building lot. I see there's been there's some real concessions being given here. Again, it's not perfect, but to allow covenants in perpetuity for the height of the trees, I think that goes a long way with trying to work with the neighbors, and hopefully after this they can all work together. So.
Yeah. I just a question for the planner on that. I don't think that can that be a condition of a development variance permit, or it has to be just dealt with between the owners, the height of the landscaping?
That would be, to my knowledge, can't be a condition
of the DVP, but if the owner is willing to grant that covenant, that'd be a private covenant the town would not be involved with.
Correct. That is...
we could get that on a rezoning, for example, but not on a DVP.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Councillor Grant.
Just one final comment. Out of respect for Boner's, Mr. and Mrs. Boner's request to have 2 weeks for clarification, and given how much is at stake for them and the other neighbors, I still feel that the 2 week would be a good thing to do.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further discussion on the motion? And so, are you ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion? Any those opposed? 2 opposed. Motion is passed. And call Councillor Shook back We're just giving a moment for the room to clear out a bit. All right, so I think we'll carry on with the agenda here. We have another development variance permit application, 355 Douglas Street. I don't think we have a presentation on this. We have the report, and the recommendation from staff is to issue it subject to the conditions listed in Schedule 1 of the report.
Move that. Second.
Any discussion? I wanted to see some LiDAR of that. Come on.
Okay, let's see the shed roof anyway.
Usually works of the building as it's going.
There you go. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. All right. Thank you. All right, so we have at page 137 the results of the joint request for proposal on recreation booking software for information. So motion to receive.
I'll move receipt.
Second.
And all those in favor of receipt? Motion's carried. Any discussion? Councillor McKenna.
This was the Halloween event, was it?
No.
Sorry, I lost my agenda.
I've got mine right in my.
It's on your Commodore 64.
Yeah, here. That's part of the slide. He'll get that working for you.
It's just a report on the recreation department's booking software, and staff are proceeding with
Thank you,
that.
I'm in favor of that.
So the, nothing further on that, we just received that. Unless there's further questions, we'll move on to the next one, and that is the website redesign contract. Motion to receive the 3 proposals and engage Proxinos Consulting for the website redesign for the price of $25,000, which is.
I'll move that.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. And then we get to correspondence, and we will deal with that Halloween run as a 4th item there. So the first one is the pumpkin carving contest. Motion to receive and grant approvals as requested. And that's this Sunday. All those in favor? Motion carried. So we'll let them know about that. And also coming up is the Remembrance Day ceremonies for 11th of November with the candlelight ceremony on the 10th, and the requests, so motion to receive and grant the requests.
Move receipt. Second.
And we've already sent out the letter for the flyby, so that's done. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And also from the Legion, the Poppy campaign kickoff on the 27th of October, and I've already committed to be there for that, so motion received.
Move.
All in favor? Motion's carried. And then lastly, which came out as a separate item of correspondence regarding a request for an event taking place in the Northeast Woods on Saturday, October 31st. Start time 9 or 10 a.m. is for a run, and I guess a granted request. Are there any issues other than that? Have to get insurance?
Just the usual provisions of insurance and dealing with, I think from a staff perspective, the park superintendent for any issues that might arise.
Okay. Motion to that effect?
I'll move.
Seconder? Okay. Any further?
Question?
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. That was my only concern, is that, and I wanted to hear it from the CEO about insurance coverage for events like that that we approve as council.
Yes.
So the protocol for that group to follow is?
We would require proof of insurance. We would also ask, as we normally do, that they contact the emergency service providers so that they're aware of an event going on at a specific place, so that should an incident occur, they know how to respond or how to avoid, and there's no roads involved in this situation. And work with the relevant department head for the town to make it happen.
Yes, and just, it should be noted, the trails there are not smooth trails, there's roots and rocks, and kids with masks and that, I thought, yikes, that it could be injuries and whatnot. As long as they know that and there's coverage, etc. I support the event.
Yeah, usually you can get coverage relatively inexpensive through Sport BC. So that'll be up to your
That would be very wise. I'm glad it's a requirement.
If we grant the request, then that's something they'll have to, essentially like a booking of any, so.
Good intentions here from them and from what they got.
All right, so all those in favor? Motion's carried. So that deals with that late item and the last piece of correspondence. So we should be at the councillors' reports. Yes. So we'll start with Councillor Kingdom.
Well, it's been a good 2 weeks. I haven't really done much of anything. So I'll say that I have, in fact, been out with the Economic Development Society a couple of times regarding our new welcome sign, which is continuing to move along. We had some issues with sighting, so we had to change that, but we should be going full steam ahead here anytime, so hopefully getting that up to speed here as soon as we can. So that's what I've been doing.
Excellent. Councillor Knapp.
Yeah, I had a Community Justice Center meeting about a week and a half ago, and things are going well with the Community Justice Center, and they're preparing their year-end report. So once that's all fine-tuned, I'll bring that to council, and that's about it. Okay, Councillor Swift.
I attended the Philbird Board meeting. I always struggle with that name. And they received a report from the festival organizers and are pleased to report that the profits are back to the range that could be considered more typical. Last year they had a real drop, and this year it's back up to where it's been in the last number of years. So they were very pleased with that, and overall the festival went very well. There is still a concern over the competition aspect of nautical days, having crafters and promoting a free event. So I think there's some room to look at some ways to support and build relationships between the two events, and we should kind of bear that in mind. The first of their strategic planning sessions starts tomorrow, so I'll report that to you when that is completed. I also attended a full-day session of strategic planning for the hospital board, and the session did not lead to any change. It led to some good discussions, and there were no conclusions that came out of that meeting, but we will continue the discussions and the next steps at the November 5th meeting. So that's it.
Great, thanks. Councillor Price.
Yes, I attended the official opening of the new daycare centre at Glacier View. Fabulous. I also attended down in Nanaimo the ADICC-led solid waste committee, which represents all the regional districts in ADICC, and we're looking at and moving towards how we can work together, and there is this wish to continue. And that's it.
Great. Councillor McKinnon.
Yes, briefly, I attended the all candidates federal election meeting here held in Comox at the United Church, and complimented those folks for hosting that in our community. Attended the Comox Valley Community Justice Center recognition evening on Sunday, which recognizes all the volunteers, many volunteers that help with that with the organization. And attended the Comox Valley Homeless Coalition meeting yesterday, and I'm off, if I can make it in time, to Comox Valley Chamber workshop and reception this evening in Courtney.
Excellent.
My report is very small, and Councillor Swift attended the same board meeting as I did, and her report was mine as well.
Excellent, thank you. Report on a few things here. We had the Taiwanese consulate delegation here in the Comox Valley last Wednesday, and they met with the three mayors at separate venues at different times, but essentially hosted the Director General, Lin Chang, who's been here before. And I guess one thing to report out of that is that the Lantern Festival will be held this year in February, March, can't remember the exact date, and it'll be held principally in Courtney at the Native Sons Hall, but with the actual lantern release into the sky of the paper lanterns in Cumberland still occurring. So moving that event around a little bit, and they talked about some of the things they're doing to promote activity within the province and within their country. So good opportunity to exchange views and have some dialogue. I went to 2 days of meetings on the climate leadership plan, and we got one more day of that coming up this Friday, and at that point hopefully the report will be finalized and presented to Cabinet. And no doubt you've heard some talk about this Paris climate meeting coming up in early December, and the hope is that the province will be bringing something along the recommendations that we'll be making to that as part of that process. So it'll be very interesting when that comes out, and we'll see what Cabinet does with it. Community Foundation dinner was this past Saturday. I know Councillor Swift was there, I was there, and it was well attended and a great event as always. I had a meeting with people interested in reinvigorating the Block Watch program, and they'll be coming to, I think, Committee of the Whole as early as next week. So they're going to talk to us about their ideas and how we can help them promote it. And then this afternoon I attended for a short time the Economic Development's Fall Forward Marketing Forum What that was is sort of a multi-stakeholder event at the Visitor Center, talking about the upcoming opportunities for businesses to advertise and promote for events such as the Winter Jam, last 2 weeks of January, the Dine Around, the last 2 weeks of February, and of course, the 2-week festival for shellfish and seafood here in Comox, which from all accounts is going to carry on as it did last year, including the Fresh Fest concert down here on that Friday night. So that was well attended, and kind of shows you the calendar's moving fast and people are planning for the new year. So that'll unfold. And that's my report. So without any other items on the agenda, a motion to adjourn.
Media questions?
Oh, sorry. They're still here.
Well, I have a long list, but I won't hold you. Continue.
Come as a delegate.
Sorry, yeah. You can always, you know where to find us. The motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? Motion carries.